Hi, my name is Jacob Monk. Welcome to the digital reading of my article about Pope Pius XII and the Holocaust. If one follows the Vatican magazine L'Osservatore Romano and the debate between the Vatican and the Israeli state, you will find out that the question of Pope Pius XII, living from 1876 to 1958, and the so-called Holocaust is a very hot topic. It is about something very central, not only for the State of Israel, but also for the Vatican, because there is a process underway to make Pius XII the saint, and if the critics of this pope are correct that he remained silent and ignored what for many counts for being Adolf Hitler's greatest crime, then Pius XII is no saint but a criminal. For both Israel and the Vatican it is all about credibility, and nothing indicates that both parties may be right, neither materially nor morally. If the debate and the Vatican examination of Pope Pius XII's relationship to Hitler and his misdeeds is brought further, then there is much to suggest that there will be a clarification that one of the parties will not like. Apparently, there are only two possibilities. Either the Vatican will admit that the Pope that they want to make a saint, was what we today call a Holocaust denier, or they will have to admit, that what is called Holocaust really did not happen. Because a crime of that size would never have been possible to commit without the Pope being informed. Auschwitz is in Poland, and Poland is a Catholic country. The leader of the Auschwitz camp was called Rudolf Höss, and he was a Catholic too, just like many of the German soldiers and many of the prisoners. To hide the gassing of millions of Jews to the Pope, would be impossible. There is no doubt about that Pius XII was against Nazism and it is recognized by most historians that he did a lot of things to protect the persecuted Jews in Italy by allowing them to seek shelter in the Vatican and in various monasteries. This is emphasized again and again by the apologists of the Pope, and no serious debater will say something else. The problem is that it is not what the debate is about, when this debate is viewed from the other side, namely from Israel. The debate is about whether Pius XII objected to the alleged mass extermination of 6 million Jews in gas chambers at Auschwitz, Treblinka, Majdanek, and Chelmno, or not. And the problem is, that nothing shows that he did protest. Why? Because he did not know? That is unreliable according to the Holocaust historians. No one can seriously claim that Pope Pius XII did not know what happened in the Polish concentration camps. Poland is a Catholic country, there were many Catholic priests in the camps and a large part of the German staff in the camps were Catholics, including camp leader Rudolf Höss, who was frequent a visitor to the town's Catholic church. Catholics go to confession, so in a Catholic country like Poland, nothing can be concealed from the Catholic Church, and thus for the Pope. If millions of Jews were killed by gas in Auschwitz, the Pope would know. Red Cross visited Auschwitz and other concentration camps several times and they talked to the prisoners. During none of these visits they were informed of any mass execution in gas chambers. The Allies had weekly screening flights over Auschwitz, to take aerial photos of the camp. But again they saw no gas chambers, just as they did not get such notifications by tapping the camp's encrypted electronic communication, whose codes the British had broken. If they had overheard credible reports on mass executions with gas, they supposedly would have bombed the gas chambers, which would have been a simple matter, since the German Air Force was defeated. It is not only Pius XII, who, apparently, did not do anything to save the Jews from Hitler's gas chambers. So did President Roosevelt and Prime Minister Churchill not do anything. In their speeches and books including Churchill's 6-volume History of the Second World War, you will find nothing about gas chambers, mass extermination, and the Holocaust. It was probably the most common perception during and after the war that Hitler had little interest in executing concentration prisoners when his goal was to force them to work in the German war industry. The idea that he wanted to exterminate all Jews of the world seems very strange, when it is a fact that Hitler never controlled land where more than 1/3 of the world's Jews lived. Hitler wanted the Jews out of Germany, no doubt about that. Therefore, he and Adolf Eichmann, who spoke Yiddish language, worked with the Stern Gang and other Zionists in Palestine to get the Jews out of Germany and into Palestine, who was soon to change its name to Israel. There is no particular reason to criticize Pius XII for not protested against gassing and mass extermination of the Jews, because nobody else did it. Neither the Red Cross, the Polish priests and bishops, the US President or the Prime Minister of England protested, and when they did not, then it was probably because they knew nothing about such a mass execution, or, if they had heard of it, then they did not believe it. Just as many people still don't believe in today. Among the arguments that the Vatican has made to clean Pius XII for the moral responsibility of hiding a serious crime, that is the extermination of 6 million Jews, is that everything just would have been much worse if the Pope had protested. When using this argument, it is implicit the same as admitting that he had knowledge of the mass extermination, but chose to keep quiet, not to provoke the offender to do something even more horrifying. But this argument does not stand. Political correctness has never in any other situation in history kept the Pope from protesting against unfair treatment of people of other religions, so why should Pius XII be afraid to protest, if the thought there was something to protest against? It is difficult to see how a crime may be more severe than the crime that Hitler is accused of committing against the Jews. Since the 17th has been known as the Holocaust, with the first letter in capital. If the Pope was in favor of a moral principle not to protest against evil, not to make it worse, so it's hard to understand why he several times, before and after the war, protested against communist oppression of the Catholic Church in the Russian-controlled countries. In that case, he also should have kept quiet about this, not to provoke the oppressors. But he did not. Nowadays this what Pius XII and Churchill and Roosevelt did is called Holocaust denial. Time has changed. Although the postulated mass extinction was the basis of severe judgments at the Nuremberg trial, there was no one who took the story of gas chambers seriously. It is the winners of the war that writes the history, and the purpose of the Nuremberg trial was to show the losers of the war as being immoral. The Allies succeeded. Since Hollywood in the 60s produced a television series entitled Holocaust, this notion has become a central theme in all discussion of World War II. There is hardly one major US or European city that does not have a Holocaust museum, and we can daily watch TV shows where we are taught that the Holocaust was the central and moral defining event of the World War. It is mostly because of the Holocaust that today Hitler is accounted for as a psychopath and war criminal, while his opponents are idealized and regarded as heroes. The concept of the Holocaust has today taken an iconic status, and there are reasons why the former Catholic, now Muslim, Roger Garaudy calls one of his books for the foundational myth of Israel. Garaudy writes that the Holocaust story now has reached a religious status, and today serves as the ideological foundation for the State of Israel, and to some extent for the entire Western world too. You are therefore in many Western countries not allowed to raise doubts about the historical credibility of the Holocaust story. It is illegal to call it a myth, and every school child has to learn about this event, and learn never to ask too many critical questions about the factual truth of this story. In Germany and France one will be imprisoned if you indicate that you do not believe in the historical reality of the mass extermination in gas chambers. It is therefore correct to describe the Western post-Christian culture as being a Holocaust culture, since this concept, and not Christianity, is the foundational myth of the Western world. To deny the story of the Holocaust leads to the same kind of sanctions that were once triggered, if you express doubts about the Trinity or, like Galilei, the sun's assumed rotation around Earth. You go to jail. Israel has the full support of US and the Danish politicians. Racism and colonialism is something abhorrent when it takes place in South Africa, but when it happens in Palestine and the racists are Jews, it is quite all right. The so-called Holocaust survivors are not judged by the same moral rules as other people. USA and Israel is protected by exceptionalism. They don't have to follow international and moral rules, because they are so powerful, that no one can punish them. I think that Israel is going to win the debate with the Vatican on Pius XII. Not because they are right, but because they control the media in the United States, which obviously supports Israel. In the spring of 2007, the Vatican's ambassador threatened in Israel to boycott a memorial in the Israeli Holocaust Museum, Yad Vashem, and the reason was that they could not tolerate that the Israeli interference in the process of making Pius XII the saint. But the Vatican makes no secret of the fact that they believe that the Hollywood-promoted version of the Holocaust is the truth. In the Vatican they read the Jewish press, and, unfortunately, they believe what they read. And according to this version of history, nothing can rescue Pius XII from being morally complicit in the mass extermination of Jews from 1940 to 1945. Here is my conclusion. Either the extermination of 6 million Jews in the Polish gas chambers is a historical reality, and then Pius XII knew of it. That makes him morally co-responsible for 6 million deaths. Otherwise we must recognize that the historical reality of Auschwitz and the other KZ camps is quite different from what is shown in the Hollywood movies. The conclusion is that either Pius XII was a Holocaust denier and a morally decaying individual, or the reality is that he did not believe the stories of gassings or mass extinction in the German concentration camps. He believed the same as Red Cross, Winston Churchill, and President Roosevelt. He did not believe in the extermination myth and therefore he did not protest. They have different answers to these questions in Israel and the Vatican. Either the foundational ideology of Israel is false or Pope Pius XII was a Holocaust denier and a criminal. Israel and the Vatican cannot both be right. Thank you for listening.